Welcome. I love these fluted bowls. The fluting and the right kind of glaze just makes them stand out so beautiful. But it's not without challenges to make them. In this video, I will show you how I make them, and hopefully that can inspire you too. So please stay with me till the end of the video, and I will teach you exactly how you can make bowls like this. One of the challenges in making bowls like this is to make them thin enough, light enough. Now, I'm not overly obsessed with making very light pottery, but I do think that a bowl like this that you tend to pass around on the table don't have to be too heavy. I like it to feel, nice. But with a textured vase of any kind, with fluting like this, of course, it cannot be any thinner than the thinnest part. And to get the texture, you will have parts that are thicker. And so by nature, a heavily textured or fluted pot like this will be a little more heavy. Having said that, I will aim to make it as light as possible. And that goes for the bottom part of it and goes for the sides. But to be able to make the fluting, we need to start out with somewhat of a thicker size. And for the bottom here, I will just trim that. But let's start out and make one. It's probably going to be a little bit smaller than this. I'm just going to use a little more than 1 kilo of clay. I'm going to use this black clay. It's a Stoneware. I love it very much. It's from George & Snyder. It's called 371. Because it creates this beautiful black bottom. And I'm not going to glaze it down there. So I need a clay that looks good without being glazed. So let's go ahead. First, you need to decide on the base. For a bowl like this, that's going to have some fruit in it or something, I don't want the base to be too narrow. It may look elegant, but it also makes it sort of unstable. So I'm going to go with something like this. The first part of it is really like any other bowl. I'm going to open it up, not have sharp edges. I'm going to have a soft curve in the middle. And I'm going to leave quite a bit of thickness in the bottom because I want to trim a nice foot on this. Let me just check the thickness. Yeah, that's good for what I'm aiming for here. I like to use this semi-soft rib to make sure that the inside is very smooth and have a perfect curve. Now for the sides, this is where I'm going to do the fluting. I don't want it to be too thin, because then we won't have much to flute from. And I want it to be sort of vertical. So I'll use a rib to secure that. Because that's going to make it easier to make the fluting in straight lines. I do also want the bowl to go out a little bit, because that way you can stack them. If they are too straight, or if they go in, which can look really nice, then you won't be able to stack them. So from a practical point of view, I like that. Something like that. So that's it for now. Now I have to dry up a little bit to become more firm so I can do the fluting. It's too wet now. It will all just splash together. I don't want it to be too dry, so like a soft leather heart. It is summer now and it's not too cold in my studio, so probably somewhere tomorrow. So let's put this aside and make a few more. There are, of course, many ways to do a bowl. Some people prefer to do a cylinder and then expand the walls. That is a little bit challenging when you want to do fluting, because when you expand it, the walls, and especially in the top where you expand it the most, it's going to get thinner. So you need to start out with something very big. Other potters like to do it like in a V shape and then do the last part of the shaping. I did it a little bit different in the first one, but let's try some variations with the next. So you see, I'm actually pulling this more or less into the right shape to begin with. And that way I think I can better control the thickness for this sort of bowl. And I like to use this some semi-soft. These are from Mud Tools. They come in different colors. I believe the blue is the hardest, and green is semi-soft, and red is very soft. But this is good because I have a shape that works really well with the bowl. And it does give me a little bit of flexibility. So that way I can make a very smooth inside of the bowl, which naturally I want. Another thing to keep attention on is to keep the same thickness on the whole part where you're going to do the fluting. Because if it's too thin at some places, then the carving is going to cut through the wall. And of course, you don't want that. And of course, not of course, but I want the top to be completely flat because that's going to give me the best starting point from the fluting. And it's going to give me these sharp, or sort of sharp edges that makes the bowl look really nice from the top. So that was another one. So we'll do one more, at least. I think that looks good. So this time I took it a little more like a V shape. And then I'm going to pull it to the height that I want. Just trying to get enough out of the bottom. So something like this. And then I will slowly expand it with my rib. So I expand it from the top. And then I take the rib down into the bowl to create that nice smooth curve. And we can expand it a little bit more. And I keep my hand at the top to make sure that it doesn't flare out too much. And also expand a little bit at the bottom here. Make it a little bit wider. And I think we can expand it just a little bit more down here. I think that looks good. And again, I just want to make sure that the inside is very smooth and nice. The curve is round. If it's not perfect inside, when we trim it, you can always trim the inside too. I know a lot of potters will tell you never to trim the inside of a bowl or any pot. I don't care. If it works, it works. And trimming the inside can often work really good. Now I just want to make sure that the sides here are straight. So the carving, the fluting goes well. And the top flat. And that the wall, at least at the carving point, is even. I think that looks good. Just want to take off any slip water that we have inside. Dry the bed, and that's it. It goes really fast. I think that turned out nice too. It is a little bit heavy now. You can probably kind of see it, that I used maybe a little more than a kilo of clay for a bowl like this, and it should only be half a kilo or something. But we're going to carve away a lot on the sides, and then to have this side of shape, I need more clay down here. But that we can carve away too, and going to trim a foot, and after drying and everything, I think it's going to be okay. Now this next one is a little bit smaller, maybe a little less than a kilo. I always slap it a few times, because one of the problems with throwing on bats is that it may not stick. And you probably tried it when you center it and it glides off. So by pushing it down a few times, I make sure that it fits well. And then also I seal the lower part so water don't come in under it. That also helps. And then the first part of it, I push it down. So that also helps attaching it to the bat. And only when I'm sure that it is attached really well, I start coning it up. Because coning it up will pull up the clay a little bit, and if it's not attached well, it'll just fly off your bat. Yeah. And why do we cone it up? Well, it's an easy way to send it, but also it helps sort of align all the particles, so it becomes more workable in a way. And then when I push it down, don't push it straight down, because if you push it straight down, you will create this mushroom shape and you will trap air underneath. By pushing it forward a little bit, that won't happen. And just neatly fold in to this sort of a pock shape. No mushroom there. And again, smoothing the inside. And then straighten them. I like to have sort of a corner here on the outside. That will help me align the fluting. I'll show you that tomorrow. Here you go, another one. So another one, this is also about a kilo. So oh, see how it glide off. It didn't stick well enough. There's also a difference between my bats. I tested a lot of different bat materials, and this is sort of a standard MDF. It's okay, but you have to be careful to attach it really well. Otherwise, it glides off, as you just saw. But luckily enough, it was early in the throwing, so I could see this is not so good. I'll see if I can clean this a little bit more and scrape off some of the water. That sometimes helps. I think we got it. I hate when that happens, but it happens to me. It happens to everybody, I think, now and then. So this time I'll try and make it a little more like a cylinder and then expand it. It's not my favorite way of doing these kind of bowls, but I'll show you anyway. But now I just need to remember to keep the wall very thick because otherwise we're not going to have enough left for the fluting. The only good thing about doing it this way is that it tends to be a little easier to see. Now it went loose again. It's not very good. I'm trying to push it down, but it just won't stick. I think this bat got too wet, and I have to wet this up again and try another bat. This bat should be better. That's plywood, or plywood, or whatever you call it. It's usually sticks better. But let's see. So let's try again. And see, of course, this looks crazy thick, but in order to do it like this and create a cylinder and then expand it into a bowl and having enough for the carving, for the fluting, it needs to be super thick to begin with. So now I will expand it with my pull. Just the first part of it. And then I'll slowly expand it some more. I do find this to be a little more difficult. So that's why I preferably, for these kind of bowls, do the bowls, do it the other way, but I think it's gonna work out anyway. I think I want it to be a little more shallow. Just gonna expand it here. And again, just shaping the sides. And just making my corner. So, cleaning up the bed and my wheel head. And now this is ready to dry as well. That's it. Now I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bowls that are slowly drying, or maybe not so slow because it is summer, but hopefully tomorrow they should be ready to do the fluting. And I'll get back to you and I will talk about the different fluting tools that I've been using. I just got a new one. Stay with me and I will get back. Good morning. Now it's time to do the fun stuff. The trimming and the fluting, the carving of the sides of these bowls. They are a little bit on the dry side. It is summer now here in Denmark, so things tend to dry up too quickly. Maybe I should have covered up, but I think it's still okay. But before I start trimming and fluting, I want to talk about the tools that I use. I've mostly been using this from Mud Tools. I can't remember the name, but it's a wonderful tool. You have a large size cutter here and a small size. I usually use the large size. There's also one, this is rounded. There's also one that have a triangled one. I like these rounded ones. They're wonderful and you can easily adjust how deep you cut with this. But I also got a new tool from CM Tools. It's a nice tool. It comes with 3 different width of the fluting, which is wonderful. But let me just show you here. Let's get it out here. But as you see, or maybe you don't see, but it doesn't cut as deep as the other one. So before we start trimming here, we want to choose which tool to use. I'm going to start out with this. And you may want to check, let me just take this out. You may want to check how deep you will cut. So in other words, you have this tool and you will cut maybe like this. And now you can look at the top and see, is it too thick or is it good enough? As I said, I like to make it too thick when I throw it, because then at this stage I can adjust. And in my case, I can actually trim it down a little bit, so make it a little bit thinner. Because again, we're gonna fight on getting it to a thickness or weight that is not too bad. So I will trim it down just a little bit. The inside looks fine. In case you have a little bit of a bulb, or what some refer to as a beginner's shoulder, where the curve is not completely smooth but bumps a little bit, you can also trim that. But don't tell your pottery teacher, because they probably tell you not to trim the inside of bowls, but don't listen to them. It works fine. So, but in this case, it looks good. So I'm going to trim the outside a little bit, and then we will take it off the bat and do the carving, the fluting. The reason that it's wobbling a little bit now is probably because I put the bat on in the wrong order, because my bats are not perfectly aligned. So if I don't put it on the same way as I did when I threw them, it wobbles. Now you see it doesn't wobble, so it's still okay. So I'm just going to take off a little bit. Of course, when you do this, you need to maintain the same thickness. Otherwise, your fluting may cut through some places. I want to make sure that it's nice and flat at the top. I think this is getting better now. Just to make sure that it's absolutely flat, I may want to use a bigger loop tool. So I think that's good enough now. We can just double check. And see if it fits. I think this is going to be good. It's going to cut it very thin. So on the thinnest part, it's going to be very thin, but that's what we want. So now just need to liberate it from the bat, and to do that, I like to undercut just a little bit so that when I cut it, it won't pull in too much clay underneath. It's a little bit on the dry side, but yeah, we made it. And now, of course, it is a little bit heavy because I have a lot of clay down here and we still need to cut out the fluting, so it will be a lot lighter. So the first thing I do before I start trimming the bottom is to do the fluting, because the fluting is not going to be even down here. So after, when you trim it, it will look really nice. So to do that, I like to raise it a little bit. It's just easier to work that way. I'm just going to put a bucket and let me just adjust. And a plate and a band wheel. And I put it on the edge like this because I need to be able to cut all the way through. If I do it in here, I won't be able to get to the bottom of my bowl. So placing it like this, you will have to turn it as you go. Now when you do the cutting here, it's sort of tricky because you need to make sure that it's cutting enough, but not too much. And with this tool, it's a question of the angle. So I can see here, this is going to be the right angle. And I'm going to hold my hand on the back side to support it. So don't accidentally push in the wall. And then try and do one continuous cut like this. See, now we have a cut. And then just follow through all the way around the pot. And now all this scrap is falling on my floor, which is a little bit stupid because I don't reclaim clay that's been on the floor because it could be contaminated by dust and stones and whatever crap is on my floor. So if you want to reuse that, put something here, some plastic or something to contain it. But now for this, we're just going to continue. And see, now you need to move it a little bit because you can't really do it when it's over the band wheel. So I'm just going to go all the way through. And I don't care so much how I end it. We're going to fix that in a second. I hope you can see it, but that's the best I can do. I like to have them close to each other. You could also make it with a distance. I mean, it's up to you and whatever design preference you have. But just be careful when you do this because it will get weaker and weaker. You can already see now that on the thin parts of it, it is actually very thin now. And that's what I talked about in the beginning. For a textured pot, you can make it thin on the lowest parts, but here it's going to be thicker. So a pot like this is not going to be as thin as a pot that's have no carving. I mean, to get this texture, some of it have to be thicker. That's just the nature of it. Now the tricky part is when you get to the end, because you want to sort of measure so that it becomes even. In this case, I think I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I think that looks good. So already now it feels a lot lighter. So let's get back to the wheel. Now it's time to trim it. So I want to trim this part so it becomes, let me show you. I want to trim this part so all the endings of my carvings becomes even. And also it's a lot of clay down here. So this thickness needs to be thinner. And I also want to trim a foot. And for that, of course, you need to get a feeling for how thick your button is. This one is not terribly thick. It's only about 1 centimeter or so. In case you want to measure exactly how thick it is, you can use a ruler like this. Let me just show you. You can buy this, but I made it myself. I took 2 metal rulers. One of them I made a hole in, so it fits this ruler. And then you can put it over the top and put this ruler down here and measure the inside. In this case, it's 7.5 centimeter. Then you take it on the outside, and it's 8.1 or something. So it's actually only about, let me just check again, is that true? No, I was wrong. It's 6.5 centimeter on the inside and 8 on the outside. So a total of 1.5 centimeter. So in other words, I can easily trim off about 1 centimeter and still have 0.5 centimeter left. So now it's time to do the trimming. And first, of course, we need to center it. You could, of course, tap center if you know how to do that. I'm not very good with that, so I'm just using this finger technique, holding my finger in place, and then I move it a little bit. And that's good. Now I want to secure it, and as always, when you secure it with lumps of clay, push it down into the wheel head, not into your pot, because that could break the wall. So push it down, and then just push it a little bit in, but don't push in on the wall. So that's good. First, I just want to do some rough trimming. One of my favorite tools for this is another mud tool. I forgot the name of it. Most pottery stores will have it. You have a flat side. It's very good for trimming the flat side of your foot, like this. And then you have this funny round one that's really good for, yeah, well, a lot of things. But before I move on with too much, I want to find out where I want the outer part of my foot. And in case you didn't send that completely, this is also your chance to make it really circular. I'm not going to cut off too much here. I'm just going to mark it like that. And now, in order to keep this circular, if I went in from the side, it would keep the wobbling or unevenness of it. Instead, I'm going from the top down. That way, you kind of cut a completely perfect circle. And you need that to do the inner part of your foot. I'm not too focused on the rest of the side right now. I'm just going to focus up here. So now we have a circle, perfect circle. So now we can mark the inner part of the foot. And I do this to begin with, so I can see, is this the width I want of the foot, and is it completely circular? And this looks good to me. So I'm going to put a little bit deeper. So now I have this marking, and now it's time to scrape off the inner side of it. And maybe, this is pretty flat, but maybe if it's wobbling a little bit, it's important that you don't lean your tool on the pot, but instead hold it in place. Another trick is to start using the corner. Instead of using the flat side of the trimming tool, use the corner, because that's going to apply the least drag on your pot. And it's easier to hold it in place. Lean your elbows on your knee, on your laps, and just keep it as steady as possible. So now, of course, you have all these tops, but they are easier to remove than trying to remove it all at once. I'll go like that a few times. Now we may want to move to a loop tool that's a little bit bigger. It's also easier to even out the scratches and the texture that I got initially. And also, I mean, it's again an aesthetic issue. I like the curve or the foot to have a little bit of a curve. So it sort of follows the flow of the pot. So it's going to be deeper here than it's going to be in here. And of course, it's a matter of taste. You can also make it completely flat, but I just like that. It makes it look more organic. And try not to push it down, but rather scrape it off. Because if you push too much, then there's a risk that you're going to push through or make the inside of the bottom pop up. You can also tap it, and that will tell you something about how thick it is. The deeper the sound, the thinner it is. And right now, it's rather high pitched. This takes some practice, but you'll get it. You can, of course, also use your ruler tool, place it like this, and then you can see how much you cut off. In the middle, I cut very little. Out here, I cut also just half a centimeter, so I actually have plenty of room to go. I mean, it's not because I want a super thin button, but I want to remove as much clay as possible, because in any case, a textured pot like this is going to be more heavy. So the more I can get away with in places like this, the lighter the overall ball is going to be. I don't know if you can hear it, but it is a little more higher pitched now. Yeah. So I want to make sure that my walls here are even. And here, in the end of it, I'm gonna move to an even wider trimming tool, because that's gonna make it easier to make the surface here very smooth. And this pot, I like it to be I also want to make sure that the actual foot is flat and even. And I want to round the corners just a little bit because, again, as I mentioned lots of times, very sharp corners tend to chip off much easier. And because this is a bowl, it's going to be used and moved around, put in dishwasher, it's going to have a lot of wear and tear, and therefore it needs to be as strong as possible. There's a little bit there, yeah. I think that looks good now. I'm just gonna smooth it with my fingers. You may also use a shiny stone and sort of burnish it a little bit. It just makes it look really, really nice. So I think that's good enough for the inside. And now I'm gonna do the outside. And so here, as you may see, the cutting here is not completely even. I didn't end them the same way all the way around. So that's something I can fix now. And again, hold on to your tool. Don't let the tool move in and out with your pot, but keep it very steady. And it's going to feel bumpy down here because it is. So now, I don't know if you can see it here, but now it's going to end very smooth and very even. And so even if you cut it a little bit uneven, it's just going to look nice now. Now it's just time to make this thinner. And again, I want to remove as much of the clay as possible. And of course this is tricky because how thick is it? I don't know, but you can tap it and you can listen to it. And it's a matter of experience, and I'll tell you if you never cut through, you're not cutting away enough. It's gonna happen to you sooner or later. It happens to all of us, but hopefully not too often. And I'm gonna make this into a nice foot. So we're slowly getting there. So now it's beginning to look really nice. And you can smooth it with your finger, or you can use a rubber rib of some kind. Remember, this is not going to be glazed, so it's nice that it's super smooth, and you may even want to use the shiny stone to burnish it. So now it looks really nice. And finally, I'm going to put my maker's mark. And I know that I mentioned this a few times before, but I had these made by a woman with a company in Ukraine, and they're wonderful. They're made out of stainless steel, so they can be very, very thin, very fine, and they're super strong. Probably going to last my lifetime. except if you throw it down on stone or something. But they're very, very nice, and they were actually not that expensive. So I'll put a link to it, the web shop where you can buy them, and I can highly recommend that. I'm just going to put it here on my foot, like that. Just make sure that it's still even and smooth. And that's it. Except now I just want to check the weight. And yeah, now the pot feels really light. Actually, surprisingly light, considering the fact that we still have these thick parts of it. So now it's just time to let it dry, which will actually make it even lighter because there's still some water in this clay. So I think this is going to end up being surprisingly light by the end of production. And if there's a little bit of crumbles left here, don't do anything about it now, because it's if you try to remove it now, you'll just smudge it into the grooves. Let it dry, and it'll become very easy to remove. So I think that's it for now. I have a few more to do, but it's basically the same as this one. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please subscribe, share, write a comment, and come back next week. Every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central European Time, I will release a new video, and when these ones are fired, I will also show you how I glaze them. That's an interesting thing. And which glazes work great with this sort of fluting. So I hope to see you soon again, and have a good day.